Well, several community support groups say they cannot do it alone in providing low-cost or free services for those in need. Well, that's why these ground-up efforts have turned to partnerships with the government to make their work possible. Our two interest groups tell Richa Mathew how they have benefited from such collaboration.
At Tianda Temple, it's not just worshippers seeking solace from the gods. The Law Society of Singapore's charity wing is also helping those seeking justice. This community law office is making legal services accessible to those who cannot afford it. Its location is key to supporting those who need it.
The temple is a place where naturally a lot of the clients that we want to attract come. They could be the elderly, people who are not so technologically savvy and may require more assistance in order to connect to services.
Since this law office opened its doors in February last year, it's handled over 900 cases. Even with such subsidized legal aid available to the community, Pro Bono SG wants to play a bigger role in plugging any gap in the system. That's when its partnership with several ministries came in.
We articulated very clearly the gap which we intended to fill in the system, then serve those which fall through the cracks. It could be people that don't qualify because they marginally fail the means test, because the scope of their matter is not covered by the Legal Aid Bureau or the Public Defender's Office, or it could be people who are of foreign nationality.
It's this same passion to help the community that brought these youths together. Happiness Initiative, a social enterprise, runs these well-being circles. It wants to spread well-being awareness to all. But creating such a space from scratch was not easy. They sought help from government agencies to overcome its hurdles.
We are not a non-profit whereby you would really get grant or get support. As a social enterprise, right, you need to make sure that your revenue could sustain the programs that you roll out to the community. So I think a big part of it was that the government supported it in terms of funding.
If you are passionate about your work, you will actually put in your soul.
Finding enough people to test the well-being centers was another task.
The government actually connected us with some of the other agencies, for example, NYC Youth Corps. So the government actually helped us by doing the connection so that we could recruit more volunteers.
The next step is scaling up its work with National Youth Corps and running the program for another 3 years. Finding support for such community initiatives might get easier with the newly launched Singapore Government Partnerships Office. Its role is to lend a helping hand to citizens and interest groups committed to better their community and those around them.
And for more on what citizen-government partnerships can look like, we're joined in the studio by Dr. Carol Sun, she's Principal Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies, and Larry Yung, he's Executive Director of Participate in Design.
And also joining the panel over Zoom is Dawn Yip, Coordinating Director of the Singapore Government Partnerships Office. I'll start with both of you in the studio before we get to Dawn. Where are we on citizen-government partnerships in Singapore?
Good evening. What we see right now in Singapore is a clear evolution from traditionally a more top-down type of decision-making when it comes to developing solutions to solve different types of policy issues that Singapore faces, to more bottom-up and more collaborative model of governance. So this is something that we're observing in many parts of the world as well. So what we see here today that's available to Singaporeans is a wider repertoire of tools and platforms for people to get involved in, from the very simple acts of, say, volunteering, making donations, to participating in citizens' panels and citizens' work group to co-create and co-implement solutions. So these are what we're seeing. And then as a researcher who studies the process, we observe the process, we analyze the process, and we can observe the positive benefits it has for policy making as well as on citizens themselves.
And of course, being a practitioner on the ground, we have also, like what Carol have said, observing more government taking the effort to do more engagement and be more actually intentional in terms of getting citizens involved. And on the hand of citizens, I think we are also seeing a more desire for citizens to come forward to co-define agenda with the government and a desire to participate in such engagement that Carol have just mentioned.
Larry, your initiative, Participate in Design, at its heart, it says that you believe that design starts with people, if I'm correct. So the question is, why is it so important as well? I mean, it sounds good, but why is it so important to resilience in a nation? And that question's to both of you. Larry, maybe you can begin.
Yeah, I think, of course, the first thing first is I would say diversity. As society getting more diverse, I would say opinions are also getting more diverse. I think our citizens need that safe platform to be able to discuss these differences. And I think that is very important to build the trust between the government and the communities, and also, within the community. And I believe Carol may have more to add to that as well.
Yeah. So it's not just about giving people the opportunity to come up with solutions to solve different types of problems they face in their lives, be it, say, diabetes, health issues, to work-life balance. When we observe and study the process and analyze the data that we collect from the participants before they take part in the engagement and after they take part in the engagement, we found several benefits which I think are really key, right, to, like you said, building social resilience. One of which is they gain a better knowledge of what it means to make difficult decisions. So they listen to people whom they usually wouldn't get to meet on a daily basis. Through the process of working together, they hear one another out. They consider conflicting perspectives. They reach an agreement, and they learn how to galvanize support for their ideas. So all these are very important for, say, growing the muscles of a very active and resilient citizenry.
All right, Dawn needs to come in here. Now, earlier we heard Carol talk about how she sees the landscape evolving from less of top-down to more bottom-up, more desire to collaborate on all fronts. Now, we might say that now, but I think there's always been a desire bottom-up to engage with leaders, to engage with government, to create the solutions that we would like to see in our lives. How has this evolved over the years?
Thanks, Wei Su. Well, I would describe the change in two ways. The first is that looking at the broad arc of how the government has changed in its approach to governance, we've broadly shifted from consultation, that means getting feedback and suggestions from the public, to also co-creation. That means getting them involved in taking action as well. So the consultation to co-creation shift is something that's happened over the last 10 years, I would say. And then with SGPO, the Singapore Government Partnerships Office that was just launched on Friday, the one thing we're saying is that up to now, the government tends to be the one taking the lead in initiating co-creation. It often sets the agenda. It often says, this is the issue we're going to work on together, and then invites public participation. But with the Singapore Government Partnerships Office and the portal that we set up, citizens can now take the initiative, and there's a first stop place for them to go to without even waiting for the government to say what the big issues of the day are. And the pledge is that we will try to find the support for them once they've articulated their ideas and put down what they're trying to achieve.
Sorry, very quickly, if I could follow up on this. Now, what I read online, submissions on the portal will then be channeled to relevant agencies and authorities. But then who then does this co-creation? Who makes the unilateral calls, which must be made, unpleasant as they may sometimes be, to make sure we get the solutions that we need? Dawn, very quickly.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Wei Su. What we're hoping for is not so much a unilateral yes-no, just on the basis of a submission. Partnership often requires a little bit of conversation to help the citizen who made the submission clarify their thinking. And also, as the government agency receives the proposal, they may also need to share with the citizen what's already going on in the space, maybe connect them with other people who are already working in the space. And so we really hope it's a journey together rather than a, like you said, unilateral, yes, no, right off the bat.
Larry, so what I hear there from Dawn as well is that inherent in that process, there may be some challenge because you're talking about not just the idea to co-create this solution, this sort of idea that has to grow or evolve, but also the influence that's involved to get to that decision-making, the final decision-making to make a solution viable, right? So what are the biggest challenges to that?
I think there are two main challenges. The first one is about inclusivity and access, because oftentimes we are talking about diverse communities, like what I said earlier. So these will include people from lower income, or even sometimes your foreign worker community, domestic workers. How can we ensure some of these diverse voices that we don't usually hear from are brought to the table so that they can be part of that conversation before we make certain decisions? So inclusivity and ensuring diverse views is one challenge that we often face in a lot of community projects that we work with. And of course, the second thing that we often face is about closing the loop, and also even the opportunity to co-create agendas with our communities. Because oftentimes, the opportunity to co-create agendas could be limited.
Yeah.
And also in terms of having the safe platform to have diverse views, is also something that we often face.
Okay.
And,
So on that point, Dawn, just to bring you in on that, how do you ensure that diversity then?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that has always been a mainstay in Singapore society is our watchfulness over race, religion, languages. So we want to make sure that every engagement, every partnership we do is cognizant of those factors. I think there are also new points of diversity coming in that maybe weren't so prominent in the past. Recently, of course, we've had the Enabling Master Plan elevating societal awareness and understanding of persons with disabilities. So that's another group we want to be very watchful of. In some of the engagements I've been involved with, one of the main learning points on the part of facilitators like myself, actually personally, was understanding how to facilitate persons with disabilities, people who may be hearing impaired, people who may not be able to move in the same way as other people, and just being watchful about how we design sessions so that persons with disabilities feel included. Maybe one other dimension of diversity that I'd love to bring up is the idea of different income groups. I think for persons with lower income, coming to an engagement or partnership type session, really there's a strong cost for them. And so it may be harder for them to participate. So those are some considerations that we want to be very watchful of when we're designing partnerships.
Yeah.
All right, a final question to all three of you, and we'll keep it really short. Your aspirations, this panel is 3 days old, set out on Friday. So Carol, yourself, then Larry, then Dawn, very quickly.
We want to see how technology can be better leveraged to involve citizens at different stages of the policy making. That would be great. We see a lot of examples of these in other countries, so we are certainly on the right path. So we hope to, do more and explore and be creative with technology.
I think for me, it's just for government agencies to be more open and really embrace citizen engagement.
And a word from Dawn.
Thank you. I'll just add the final thought that I hope citizens will continue to care enough and feel empowered to want to take action with the government or even on their own. I just wanted to share one line from the Forward Singapore report, out of which the Singapore Government Partnerships Office was born. And this line says that we want Singaporeans who will think less about I, me, and mine, and more about we, us, and ours. And I think if we do that, Singapore is going to be, we're going to reach SG 100 and beyond without any trouble.
We, us, and ours, we'll remember that. Thank you very much. Dr. Carol Sun, here in the studio, Principal Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies. Larry Leung, Executive Director of Participate in Design, as well as on Zoom there, Dawn Yip, Coordinating Director of the Singapore Government Partnerships Office, SGPO. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.